Davis welcomes you warmly tonight. He smiles gently. Did you find a little peace today? And what warm drink is beside you right now? A soft autumn hush settles in his voice. He invites you to share your thoughts in the comments and to subscribe for tomorrow's tale. Then he leans in, lowering his tone, guiding you toward Miss Marple's new puzzle. A quiet path, a quiet village, a quiet beginning. Tonight, the quiet village of Hollingford Green hides something uneasy. Miss Marple stepped down from the small local train. Fog wrapped around the platform. Soft, thin, not heavy, but present enough to blur the edges of everything. The station was quiet. No chatter, no rush, just the low hum of the train cooling behind her. A porter stood near the luggage cart. Older man, simple cap, hands tucked into his coat. He watched Miss Marple approach, with polite caution. "Good afternoon," she said, her voice gentle, warm, calm. He nodded once. "Afternoon, ma'am." Miss Marple placed her small bag on the cart. The porter hesitated before touching it, as if unsure whether to speak. His eyes shifted toward the lane beyond the station gate. Miss Marple noticed. She always noticed. "Is something the matter?" she asked softly. A simple question. No pressure, no alarm. The porter cleared his throat. "It's just, well, folks say the village changes after fog." Miss Marple paused, not startled, only thoughtful. "Changes? How so?" The man looked around, checking the empty platform, checking the silent waiting room, checking the shadows near the ticket window. He leaned a little closer, not too close, just enough for a private tone. "People keep indoors, keep quiet. Best way, some say." Miss Marple nodded. "Fog can unsettle even the calmest soul." He shook his head. "No, ma'am, not the fog. What comes with it?" His words lingered in the cool air. Not spooky, not dramatic, just honest and uncertain. Miss Marple studied his expression. There was no malice, no attempt to impress, just a quiet worry. The simple kind villagers carry when truth and rumor get tangled. "Thank you," she said. "Your honesty is helpful." The porter looked relieved, maybe for being heard, maybe for saying as much as he dared. He lifted her bag, pointed toward the narrow exit. "Mrs. Alderton's motor car is waiting. End of the lane, ma'am." Miss Marple walked with steady steps. Her shoes clicked lightly on the stone. Fog followed her, not deep, just enough to soften the path. She took in everything. The stillness, the empty benches, the closed station office, the way even a cough or footstep seemed too loud. Something lived in the quiet. Not danger, not yet, but something not spoken openly. She could feel it in the way the porter's eyes darted, in the way the station seemed to hold its breath. Miss Marple never jumped to conclusions. She allowed small clues to settle, piece by piece. Quietly, she reached the station gate, paused. A faint shift of air caught her attention. Someone stood at the far end of the lane, still, watching. Miss Marple did not hurry. She simply lifted her chin, calm, collected. She observed the outline, too far to identify, too still to be casual. For a moment, the figure remained, then stepped back, out of sight. Miss Marple adjusted her gloves, her voice barely a whisper. "Interesting." She continued toward the waiting motor car, her mind already working, quietly, logically, without alarm. And as she reached the road, the fog drifted again, soft as breath. Someone watched her from the edge of the lane. Miss Marple reached the motor car waiting at the end of the lane. A woman stepped out at once. Quick movements, anxious smile, hands twisting, the clasp of her handbag. "Miss Marple? I'm Clara Alderton. So relieved you've arrived." Miss Marple returned the smile. Warm, steady. "Thank you, Mrs. Alderton. Very kind of you to meet me." Clara nodded too quickly. Her eyes darted toward the lane as if checking for someone, or something. "Do get in," Clara said. "Fog makes everything feel unsettled." Miss Marple slid into the seat. The motorcar smelled faintly of dust and lavender polish. Clara drove with tight fingers, her breaths sharp, as though she held back words she didn't want escaping. "You'll be staying with us," Clara continued. "In the guest room. I do hope it's comfortable." "I'm sure it will be." Miss Marple said. Clara gave a quick nod but didn't relax. Not even for a moment. They rolled down a narrow lane lined with hedges. The fog drifted behind, them in thin sheets, soft, quiet, almost hesitant. When they reached the Alderton home, Clara rushed out first. She smoothed her skirt, tried to appear calm, failed. "Julian," she called toward the doorway. "She's here." A young man stepped out of the house. Tall, sullen, expression, dark hair falling unevenly over his forehead. His hands caught Miss Marple's attention at once. Stained, dark streaks along the fingers, fresh scratches near the knuckles. He nodded at her without warmth. "Miss Marple." "Julian," Clara said gently. "Help her with her bag." Julian lifted it with a stiff grip. The bag was light, but he handled it as if it were a burden. Miss Marple noted the tension in his shoulders, and the way Clara watched him. Fear in her eyes, but no accusation. Just worry, deep worry. Inside the house, the air felt tight, not heavy, just controlled. Footsteps approached from the hall. A middle-aged housekeeper appeared. Thin frame, sharp gaze, pressed apron, no smile. "This is Mrs. Briskly," Clara said. "She manages the house." Mrs. Briskly gave a short nod. "Your room is prepared. Follow me." Miss Marple followed, observing the details Clara hoped she wouldn't. Mrs. Briskly walked with purpose. No softness, no hesitation, as though the house ran on her cadence alone. Every surface was cleaned, very clean. Too clean. Miss Marple noticed a polished table, a vase, slightly shifted. A rug pulled half an inch off center, then corrected. Someone had moved through the room quickly. Recently, carelessly, then tried to fix it. "Your room," Mrs. Briskly said, opening the door. Miss Marple thanked her. The housekeeper left without another word. Clara hovered at the doorway, uncertain, trying to hide her nerves. "I hope you'll be comfortable here," she murmured. "I will be," Miss Marple replied softly. Clara attempted a smile. It didn't settle. She clasped her hands again. Her wedding ring twisted back and forth, a sign of a troubled mind. "Miss Marple." He watched her quietly, kindly, not judging, simply noticing. Julian appeared at the end of the corridor. His stained hands slipped into his pockets. He looked away when Clara glanced at him. The housekeeper watched them both from the stairs, her face unreadable, but her eyes sharp, too sharp. Three people, three tensions, three different kinds of worry. Miss Marple could feel it in the walls. Nothing loud, nothing dramatic. Only the quiet strain of a house trying to hide something small and failing. She set her bag down, removed her gloves, listened to the steps fading down. The hall. One detail stayed with her. Clear, unmistakable. Something that did not match the rest of the house, or the rest of their stories. One detail didn't fit, not at all. Mrs. Alderton brought Miss Marple a cup of tea. Her hands trembled faintly as she set it down. Just enough for Miss Marple to notice, not enough for Clara to admit. "Please," Clara said, "sit with me a moment." Miss Marple did, quietly, calmly. Clara folded her hands in her lap, unfolded them, folded them again. Her breath kept catching in small, uneven pauses. "There's something I should tell you," she began. Simple words, but they carried strain, deep strain. Miss Marple nodded, just once, inviting, never pushing. "You saw the fog today," Clara said. "The village doesn't like fog." Miss Marple waited. Clara continued. "It's not the weather, it's what people think comes with it." A soft clatter came from the kitchen. Mrs. Briskly moving pans, not roughly, but with a sharp edge, as though listening. Clara lowered her voice. "There's an old cottage on the other side of the village. Well, what's left of it? Just ruined stones. Now." Miss Marple took a small sip of tea. She said nothing. Let Clara speak at her own pace. "Years back," Clara said, "people claimed they saw lights there. Little glimmers. Not lanterns. Not torches. Just lights." Her voice tightened again. Not from fear, from embarrassment. She didn't want to believe the story herself. Miss Marple leaned in a little. "People notice small details more in quiet places," she said softly. Clara nodded. "Yes, but it wasn't just lights." She hesitated. looked toward the window. Fog pressed lightly against the glass. Animals went missing, Clara whispered. Livestock, dogs, even chickens. No sign of struggle, no tracks, just gone. Julian passed the doorway at that moment. He didn't enter, just slowed for half a second, listening. His stained hands stayed in his pockets. Then he moved on. Clara waited until he was out of earshot. The villagers blamed the cottage, or what's left of it. Old stories grow roots here. Miss Marple nodded gently. Fear spreads quickest in quiet villages. Clara took a shaky breath. The elders say the land around it is cursed. They warn children not to go near it. Some grown men refuse to walk past the turn. Miss Marple held her teacup steady. She did not smile. She did not dismiss. She simply listened. They say the lights return only in fog, Clara said. That's why today unsettled people. A spoon tapped, faintly in the kitchen. Mrs. Briskly again, always listening, always near. Clara's voice dropped even lower. No one talks about it openly, but when fog rolls in, everyone watches the ridge. Miss Marple tilted her head slightly. And have you seen these lights yourself? Clara looked down at her hands. No, but I've heard them speak. In the shops, in the lanes. Whispers, warnings, as if the cottage ruins wake up with the fog. Miss Marple placed her cup on the saucer. Calm, precise, her mind already sorting the pieces. Folklore, fear, convenient. Stories, useful for someone who wanted privacy. Or secrecy. Clara gave a small, nervous sigh. I shouldn't trouble you with old tales, but they do matter here, more than they should. Miss Marple nodded softly. Old stories often hide new truths. Clara looked at her with wide, worried eyes. Then she whispered, and they all fear the place called the Hollow Path. Mrs. Alderton entered the sitting room with quick steps. Too quick, her face pale, her hands shaking in small, controlled movements. Miss Marple, may I speak with you? Miss Marple set aside her knitting, calm, ready. Of course, my dear. Clara closed the door behind her, not loudly, but firmly enough to show strain. It's Evan, she said. Her voice broke on the name. Evan Alderton. My husband's nephew, 16. Miss Marple waited, quiet, steady, the way she always did when a truth needed space. He went out earlier, Clara continued. Just after breakfast. Said he wanted to fly his kite. Miss Marple nodded once. A simple morning walk? Yes. He takes it often. Toward the fields. Toward the ridge. Clara swallowed. Hands twisting the edge of her apron. Toward Hollow Path, she whispered. Miss Marple's eyes lifted slightly. Not dramatically. Just with quiet interest. And the fog? It thickened quickly, Clara said. As it always does here. But Evan knows the area. He knows every turn, every hedge, every gate. He never gets lost. A chair shifted in the hall. Julian's footsteps moved past. He paused outside the room, listening, then walked on. Clara lowered her voice even more. He didn't come back for lunch. We thought he was delayed. Then an hour passed. Miss Marple folded her hands in her lap. Has anyone gone to look for him? Yes, Clara said. My husband, Marcus. Even Mrs. Briskly went as far as the lane. But the fog, it swallowed the fields. They saw nothing. Clara paced a short, tight line, her breath unsteady. Evan always returns before the fog thickens. Always. He hates being out in it. He says it makes everything feel too close. Miss Marple listened with growing clarity. Patterns forming. Pieces shifting. Clara continued quickly. His kite string was last seen near the alder trees. A neighbor, boy, mentioned it. Said he saw Evan chasing the tail of it, running toward the ridge. Miss Marple asked softly, and after that, no one saw him. A clock ticked loudly in the silence that followed. Clara gripped the back of a chair, knuckles white. We've checked the stable, the fields, the lane. Nothing. Miss Marple rose slowly, carefully, her voice calm. Where is your husband now? Searching the far side of Hollow Path, Clara whispered. He didn't want to, but it's the only place left. Miss Marple reached for her coat. Clara blinked. You're going out? Yes, Miss Marple said gently. Fog or no fog, A missing boy requires attention. Clara hesitated, fear in her eyes. Some say the path isn't safe. Miss Marple gave a small, reassuring nod. Superstition rarely harms. People, however, sometimes do. Mrs. Briskly appeared at the doorway, silent, watching, her eyes unreadable. Julian stood at the bottom of the stairs, hands still stained, breathing uneven. Clara looked between them, worry tightening her posture. Miss Marple observed all three, every expression, every glance, every tension in the room. She had already seen enough to know this was not a simple delay, not a boy distracted by a kite, not an innocent wander into fog. She stepped toward the door, her mind steady, her logic clear, and as she reached for her gloves, the truth settled quietly inside her. Miss Marple already suspects this is no accident. The village hall buzzed with low, uneasy voices. Not loud, not chaotic, just tense. A room full of people trying to speak quietly, and failing. Miss Marple stepped inside with Mrs. Alderton. The wooden floor creaked under their feet. Eyes turned toward them at once, not accusing, just worried, deeply worried. Constable Ribbons stood near the front table, thick coat, notebook open, pencil tapping against the edge. He looked tired already. "All right, everyone," he said. "Let's keep order. We'll find the boy. His." The voice tried to sound firm. Tried. Miss Marple noticed the small shake in his hand as he turned a page. Not fear, pressure. Responsibility weighed heavily on him. Evan's father, Mr. Alderton, paced near a window, his face pale, movement sharp. He kept running a hand through his hair. Again and again. "He wouldn't go far," he muttered. "He knows better. He knows the fog. He knows the ridge." Clara tried to calm him. No use. He pulled away, tension rising in every breath he took. Near the back wall stood Marcus Alderton, hands in pockets, jaw tight, eyes darting. Around the room, restless, too restless. Someone offered him tea. He refused too quickly, then changed his mind, took the cup, didn't drink, just held it, like a prop. Miss Marple noticed. She always did. Constable Ribbons pointed at a map pinned to the wall. "The search teams will cover 3 sections. Fields first, then the lower ridge, then the path toward the ruins." Murmurs rose again. Some villagers shook their heads. Some crossed their arms tightly. Others looked toward the door, uneasy. No one wanted the ruins mentioned. Even here, even now, Ribbons pressed. "On. We need lanterns. We'll stay in pairs. Fog's lifting a little, but stay close." Evan's father grabbed the table. His knuckles whitened. Why was he near Hollow Path at all? No one answered. Not right away. Eyes shifted. Feet shuffled. People avoided each other's gazes. Then Marcus stepped forward. He liked the trees there, he said. Voice unsteady. He always went that way. Miss Marple looked at him gently. Always. Marcus blinked. Too fast. Then nodded. Yes, always. But his tone lacked certainty. Too smooth. Too quick. Too prepared. Miss Marple listened without interrupting. She let the lie breathe. Sometimes lies reveal more when left alone. A woman from the corner spoke. "I saw Evan running toward the field earlier, but I thought he'd turn back." Evan's father stiffened. "You didn't stop." "Him." Her face fell. "I didn't know he'd disappear." Voices rose again. Confusion. Worry. Guilt. Half-formed guesses floating around the room. Ribbons tapped the table. "Enough. We'll search properly. Everyone stay calm. Panic helps no one." Miss Marple stood near the doorway, silent, observing every small detail. Hands, eyes, breaths, pauses. All the signs people show when truth presses too close. Marcus shifted again. He glanced toward the exit, then toward the map, then toward Clara. As if checking how much each person knew, he wiped his palms against his trousers. A nervous habit, repeated twice. Too natural to be new. Miss Marple watched him carefully, very carefully. Something about his tension didn't match the rest of the room. Not grief, not fear. Something else. Something practiced. Evan's father stepped forward again, voice cracking. "We must find him. We must." The room fell silent for a moment. A long, strained pause. Miss Marple breathed gently, her mind sorting the puzzle, piece by piece, quietly, and one thought settled like a whisper behind her eyes. Someone's reaction felt rehearsed. Miss Marple walked with the search group toward Hollow Path. Fog thinned now, just a low curtain drifting over the hedges. Lanterns moved in steady hands. No one spoke much. Only the soft crunch of boots filled the air. Constable Ribbons led. Mr. Alderton followed close, almost too close, breathing hard. Marcus walked a little behind them. Restless steps, uneven pace. Miss Marple kept to the side of the track, her eyes low, her attention fixed on the ground. Details lived there. They always did. When they reached the bend near Hollow Path, Mr. Alderton gave a sharp cry. "Look, there on the grass." Everyone rushed forward. Miss Marple did not. She approached slowly, quietly, letting her eyes settle before her feet did. Evan's lantern lay on the ground, broken, crushed inward, glass pushed toward the wick rather than away. "That's odd, miss," Marple murmured softly. "Very odd indeed." Ribbons knelt. Dropped, perhaps. In the fog. Miss Marple shook her head. "No, the break is inward." Something struck it. A hush settled around them. Even Marcus stepped back a little. Then the constable noticed something else. "Drag. Marks," he said, his voice tight. Lines in the dirt. Thin at first, then deeper, as if something or someone had been pulled from the path toward the thicker brush. Miss Marple crouched to look more closely. Her fingers hovered over the grooves, not touching, just studying. "These marks begin here," she said calmly. "Right beside the lantern." Mr. Alderton's voice cracked. "They dragged him." Miss Marple didn't answer at once. She examined the edges of the marks. Soft earth displaced. A small clump of grass torn out. Something was moved, she finally said. "Dragged, yes, but the weight seems uneven. Not of a boy resisting." Ribbons blinked. "What does that mean?" Miss Marple nodded toward the ground. "The deeper mark begins only after 3 feet. Before that, light, very light." Marcus shifted again. Hands clenched. He could have fallen. Someone might have helped. Miss Marple's eyes lifted to him. Calm, steady, not accusing, just noticing. "That is possible," she said softly. "Anything is possible with limited information." She moved a few steps to the left. Then she saw it. A boot print, clear, pressed, deep, larger than Evan's. Worn heel, slight outward turn. "A grown man," she said, "one with a heavy step." Ribbons knelt to see. His face tightened. "That's not Evan's." "No," Miss Marple replied. "It isn't." Mr. Alderton's breath caught again. "Who was here?" "Who walked with him?" Before anyone could answer, Miss Marple gently pointed to a thorn bush. A small scrap hung from one of the lower branches. Dark wool, torn at the edge. Ribbons picked it up, held it in his lantern light. "Clothing," he whispered. "Looks like a coat." Marcus swallowed hard, too hard. His throat moved in a sharp, panicked motion he tried to hide. Miss Marple watched him, then looked back at the track, her voice steady. "These signs tell a story," she said. "A simple one, a quiet one, but not a supernatural one." The villagers behind her shifted uncomfortably. Someone whispered, "The lights, the cottage." Miss Marple shook her head just once. Soft, calm, logical. No story of ghosts could explain these marks. The search team moved past the bend and into the deeper part of the woods. The light dimmed under the trees. Not dark, just muted. Quiet in a way that felt watched. Constable Ribbons raised his lantern. "Stay close," he said, his voice firm, but thinner than before. Mr. Alderton pushed ahead. Too fast, too desperate. Marcus stayed behind him, breathing, unevenly. Miss Marple kept to the edge of the group, her steps light, her eyes steady. She followed the ground first, not the path. The deeper they walked, the more the woods changed. Branches cracked underfoot. Small twigs snapped at odd angles. Low bushes crushed. Signs of a struggle. Clear signs. Ribbons noticed them too. He crouched. "Someone moved through here in a hurry." Miss Marple nodded. She touched one broken branch lightly. The break was fresh, very fresh, only hours old. It was not an animal, she said softly. Too many clean breaks, too linear. Mr. Alderton turned in a sharp circle. Evan! Evan! His voice carried only a short distance before the woods swallowed it. No answer. Just stillness. Too much stillness. Miss Marple listened deeply. No birds. No rustle. Not even the soft tap of a squirrel. The woods were holding their breath. She looked down again. Soil disturbed. Leaves pushed aside. Marcus shifted behind her. I told him not to wander. I told him. Miss Marple didn't reply. Her eyes stayed on the ground. She followed a faint line through the leaves. Not footprints. Something else. A dragged shape. Shoulder-wide. Light at first. Then deeper. What do you see? Ribbons asked. A direction, Miss Marple said. She pointed toward the thicker brush. Something moved through here, and someone tried to clean the signs. Ribbons frowned. Clean them. Miss Marple tapped a patch of soil with her cane. Boot marks here, smudged. She pointed again. And here, deliberately brushed. Marcus stepped forward too quickly. Brushes? Who would do that? Miss Marple looked at him gently. No one worried about spirits, Marcus. Only. Someone worried about being followed. He said nothing. His jaw tightened. His eyes fixed on the trees instead of the ground. Mr. Alderton shouted again, Evan. His voice cracked. The woods swallowed the sound once more. Then Mrs. Alderton gasped behind them. There, look. Ah, small object, lay near a fallen log. Brown strap, worn leather, a buckle, ribbons bent down. His satchel, he whispered. He lifted it slowly. The strap was torn, the tear not clean, jagged, as if pulled from a shoulder in a hurried moment. Clara covered her mouth. Oh, dear. Oh, dear. Miss Marple examined the satchel. She held the torn strap between two fingers. Someone pulled sharply, she said. Not gently, not helpfully. Ribbons turned the satchel over, the contents half fallen out. A pencil, a small notebook, a folded paper, all disturbed. Not placed, dropped. Miss Marple's mind moved quietly, piece by piece. Every mark, every shift in the soil, every broken stem. This was no wandering child, no frightened boy running from fog. Someone had taken him, and someone had tried to hide the signs. She looked up at Ribbons with a calm, steady certainty, and someone had tried to hide the footprints. The trees thinned near the far edge of the woods. Miss Marple felt the ground change first. Less leaves, more gravel, a faint shift in the air. Constable Ribbons lifted his lantern. We're close, he said, his voice low, steady, but carrying tension now. The old quarry appeared through the last line of trees. A hollow dip in the earth, stone walls uneven, moss growing in thin patches. Quiet, still, too still. Mr. Alderton hurried forward. Evan, Evan, are you here? His voice echoed against the stone. A flat echo. No reply. Marcus hung back again, his steps careful, too careful. He kept scanning the ground as if checking something. Miss Marple noticed. She always noticed. Ribbons pointed toward a darker corner of the quarry. Look there. They approached, slowly. Miss Marple stepped beside him. A small kiln stood under an overhang of rock, old, cracked, but not unused. Clara gasped. It's warm, she whispered. She placed her hand near the stone, not touching, just sensing. Miss Marple leaned slightly forward. The warmth was unmistakable. Not old warmth. Fresh. This was lit today, she said quietly. Very recently. Ribbons's jaw tightened. Someone's been here. Miss Marple nodded. And not just passing through. A pile of old sacks lay to the left. Thin, worn, flattened in the center, as if someone had slept on them. More than once. Clara covered her mouth again. No. Someone living here? In this cold? Miss Marple touched the edge of one sack. Still slightly warm. A faint human scent clung to it. Not strong, but present. Yes, she said softly. Someone stayed here. Not long ago. Ribbons. Moved to a small tin cup resting on a stone. He picked it up, held it under the lantern. Tea, he said. The words flat, tense. It smells of tea. Miss Marple looked at the rim. A faint, fresh stain. They drank from it recently, she murmured. Perhaps midday. Marcus stepped closer but kept his hands behind him. He stared at the cup too intently, then looked away too quickly. Miss Marple watched him without comment. Her mind continued building the picture quietly. A warm kiln, bedding, a cup, fresh ash. Not a ghost story, not a village legend, but a person, a living person, choosing this place for privacy. But why here? Why stay in a cold quarry when there were safer shelters? Miss Marple bent down to the fire pit. The ash at the center was dark, but the edges still held pale grey dust. Freshly disturbed, she touched a small twig nearby. It snapped clean in her fingers. Used recently for the fire, not weathered. Someone warmed themselves, she said softly. Then left in a hurry. Clara whispered, "Do you think Evan was here?" Miss Marple examined the satchel again. She held the torn strap up to the light. The tear matched the height of the bedding. But the satchel itself had not been placed here. It had been dropped elsewhere. She shook her head. Evan may have passed nearby. But this place was prepared for someone else. Ribbons frowned. For hiding? Miss Marple looked around once more. Her eyes scanned the ground. No toys. No food scraps. No sign of a frightened boy. But something else. 2 sets of footprints overlapped near the kiln. One heavier, one lighter. They met someone here, Miss Marple said softly, her voice calm. Sure. Logical. Clara stared at her. Met someone? Miss Marple nodded. A small, clear gesture. Yes. This was no hiding place. Her eyes moved over the warm stones, the sacks, the cup, the careful placement of everything. This was a meeting place. The search returned to the village in a tight, uneasy line. Fog. Lifted more now. Just a thin layer clinging to roofs and hedges, but the air still held tension. A quiet kind. Heavy in its own way. Constable Ribbons suggested they speak with the schoolmaster next. Evan took lessons with him this morning, he said. Best we ask what he knows. Miss Marple agreed with a small nod. She had already noticed the schoolhouse light burning earlier than usual, a detail others missed, but she kept that to herself for now. They reached the small brick schoolhouse within minutes. The door stood open. Not wide, just a narrow gap. Enough to show someone had left it carelessly. Ribbons knocked anyway. Mr. Halberd, we need a word. The schoolmaster appeared at once, too quickly, as if he'd been standing behind the door all along. His hands shook slightly as he wiped them on his trousers. Constable. Of course. Is this about Evan? Ribbons stepped inside. Miss Marple followed. Mr. Halberd avoided her gaze. Every time her eyes met his, he looked at the floor, or the window, or his own fingers. Yes, Ribbons said. We're checking Evan's movements today. Mr. Halberd nodded too fast. He left. After. He left. After. He left. After. After. He left. After. He left after. His lesson. Fine. Perfectly fine. Miss Marple's eyes drifted across the room. A tidy desk. A stack of papers. Pens lined neatly. Shelves ordered. Everything in its place. Except one drawer. Half closed. Not fully. Not accidentally. Just enough to show a corner of something. Ribbons. Continued. What did he have with him? Mr. Halberd hesitated. A long blink. A twitch near the mouth. Only his usual books. And his notes. Nothing unusual. Miss Marple stepped toward the half-closed drawer. Quietly. Almost absently. A small hum under her breath. As if she were admiring the room. Mr. Halberd stiffened. Just a slight shift in posture. Barely noticeable. But Miss Marple noticed. She touched the edge of the drawer. Not opening it. Simply tapping it lightly. The wood shifted. A paper corner slipped further out. Ribbons looked over. What's that? Halberd spoke too quickly. Oh, just old work. Nothing of interest. Miss Marple tilted her head. Her voice soft. Warm. May I? He hesitated. The worst thing he could do. A guilty person hesitates at the wrong moments. Finally, he forced a smile. if you must. Miss Marple opened the drawer gently. Inside lay a folded map. Old, worn at the edges, drawn in pencil. She lifted it carefully. The paper unfolded with a soft crackle. A path marked. A ridge. A circle around the old cottage ruins. Lines leading to the quarry. Ribbons exhaled sharply. Where? Did you get this? Halberd swallowed. Hard. I don't recall. But Miss Marple pointed to the lower corner. Her finger steady, precise, showing the initials written neatly in small handwriting. E. A. She spoke in her soft, polite way. Evan Alderton. Mr. Halberd froze. Face draining of color. Ribbons stepped forward. You said the boy left with all his papers. Halberd nodded again. Too many times. Too fast. Yes, he did. All of them. This one was misplaced. Miss Marple studied him gently. Calm eyes. No accusation. Just understanding. And quiet certainty. You're trembling, Mr. Halberd, she said. It's quite all right. But you must understand. People don't misplace maps, they hide. His breath caught a tiny sound, barely audible. The room pressed into silence. Not dramatic, just still, waiting. Mr. Halberd's gaze flicked to the drawer, then to the map, then to the door, as if calculating something fearful, something urgent. Miss Marple watched every flicker, every twitch, every glance. A truth sat behind his eyes, a heavy one, a chosen one, and she knew now, without doubt, that he had lied, not from mischief, not from confusion, but from something deeper and more deliberate. She folded the map quietly and placed it on the desk, her voice soft, barely above a whisper. Mr. Halberd lied. But why? The meeting at the schoolhouse ended with more tension than answers. Constable Ribbons tucked the map under his arm. Mr. Halberd stayed in the doorway, shaking, eyes fixed on the floor. Miss Marple left quietly, her mind already moving to the next step. Outside, the fog thinned further. The village green appeared in soft outlines. A few villagers gathered near the benches, whispering. Their voices stopped as Miss Marple approached. Polite nods followed. Uneasy ones. Ribbons cleared his throat. There's one more person we should speak to, he said. Old Mr. Whitley. Says he saw something last night. Miss Marple nodded. People who notice small things are often very helpful. They walked the short path to Whitley's small farmhouse. Smoke rose gently from the chimney. A dog barked once from inside, then fell silent. Mr. Whitley opened the door before they knocked. As if he had been expecting them, he held his cap in his hands, turning it slowly. Constable, he said. I figured you'd come. Ribbons stepped in. Let's talk inside, Whitley. Miss Marple followed him into the simple, tidy kitchen. The farmer poured tea automatically, hands steady. His eyes, however, kept shifting toward the window facing Hollow Path. What did you see last night? Ribbons asked. Whitley leaned on the table, not dramatically, just with the weight of someone who had thought too much already. I saw a young man, he said, standing by the hollow gate. Miss Marple's eyes sharpened. Late at night? Yes, ma'am. Past 10. Fog was thick, real thick, but he was clear enough in the lantern light. Ribbons leaned closer. What was he doing? Carrying something, Whitley said. Looked like a bundle, big, held tight in both arms. Miss Marple asked softly. Could you see his face? Whitley shook his head. No, ma'am, but I saw his coat. Dark, long, and I saw him look back once. Quick, nervous-like. Then he hurried off. Ribbons frowned. Which direction? Toward the ridge. Toward the cottage ruins. The room went very still after that. A soft stillness. Not fearful, just heavy with meaning. Miss Marple gently tapped her fingertips on the table. Mr. Whitley, did anything catch on the gate? The old farmer looked surprised. You noticed that? Miss Marple smiled faintly. People often forget to check the simplest places. Whitley walked to a small drawer near the stove. He took out a torn scrap of dark wool. Found this on the gate latch this morning, he said. Didn't know if it mattered. Miss Marple accepted it in her gloved hand. She examined. The texture, the weave, the weight. Simple wool, but familiar. Very familiar. She turned to Ribbons. This matches Marcus Alderton's coat. Ribbons inhaled sharply. Clara Alderton's words about superstition echoed faintly in Miss Marple's memory. But this was not superstition. This was fabric. Caught. Torn. Real. Whitley looked confused. Marcus? Are you sure? Miss Marple nodded once. Steady. Unhurried. It is the same weave. The same shade. The same loosened edge above the hem. Ribbons muttered, I'll have to question him again. Miss Marple watched the farmer carefully. He wasn't frightened. He wasn't bragging. He was simply telling the truth, as he had seen it. And truth told calmly was often the most reliable kind. She placed the wool scrap gently on the table. No theatrics, no dread, just simple logic. Simple steps, simple conclusions. A young man at the gate, a bundle in his arms, fog thick around him, a coat brushing the latch. One name sat at the center now, quietly, firmly, inevitably. Marcus Alderton. Miss Marple folded her hands, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus now sits in the center. Of suspicion. The walk back to the Alderton house was quiet. Ribbons held the scrap of wool in his hand. Miss Marple walked beside him, her steps small and thoughtful. Fog drifted low over the grass like a soft blanket settling. When they reached the porch, Clara stood in the doorway, her face pale, her fingers twisting the edge of her apron again. Is there news? She whispered. Not yet, Miss Marple said gently. But we need to speak with Marcus. Clara nodded slowly, her eyes filled with worry. Not suspicion, worry. And something else, fear of what they might discover. Marcus was in the sitting room, hands clasped, foot tapping the floor in a restless rhythm. He looked up sharply when they entered. What now? He muttered. I told you I don't know where Evan is. Ribbons closed the door behind them. We just want clarification. Nothing else. Miss Marple stepped forward, calm, gentle, her voice soft as always. Marcus, dear, may I ask where you were last night? He blinked fast. Twice. A poor sign. Home. Asleep. Were you near Hollow Path? Miss Marple asked. Marcus stiffened. No. Why would I be? There. Ribbons set the scrap of wool on the table. Marcus stared at it. Color drained from his face. That's not. It matches your coat, Miss Marple said quietly. Perfectly. Marcus opened his mouth, closed it, swallowed. A trapped look flickered across his eyes. Then he exhaled sharply. Fine. I was there, but only for a moment. Clara gasped behind them. Marcus. He raised a hand. Let me speak. Miss Marple nodded. She watched his movements with care. No anger, just fear. Raw fear. Marcus rubbed the back of his neck. I went to find Evan's kite. He'd lost it 2 days ago. Wanted to surprise him. Thought it might cheer him. Ribbons raised an eyebrow. At night? Marcus pointed toward the door. There was moonlight. Fog came later. I wasn't thinking. I just wanted to do something kind. Miss Marple said nothing. She looked only at his hands. Scratched. Stained. Shaking slightly. Where is the kite now? She asked gently. Marcus hesitated again. Then he reached behind the armchair and pulled it out. The kite's tail was torn. A corner frayed. And there, near the edge, a faint, dried mark. Ribbons moved closer. Is that blood? Marcus flinched. I don't know. Maybe. Clara covered her mouth. Marcus tightened his grip on the kite. His voice shook. I found it snagged on a branch near the ridge. I saw the fog rolling in. I panicked. I thought someone might accuse me of something. Miss Marple stepped closer. Her voice lowered. Marcus, did you see Evan last night? No, he said quickly. Too quickly. Then again, softer. No, I didn't. Miss Marple looked at him with steady kindness. She studied his breath, his eyes, his posture. Fear, yes. Guilt. No, not the guilt of harm. A different kind. A protective one. Something held close. Something he did not want to reveal. Marcus sank into the chair, his shoulders heavy, his gaze unfocused. I only wanted to help him, he whispered. He's like a little brother. I wouldn't hurt him. I swear it. Miss Marple rested a hand lightly on the back of his chair, her voice soft as a thread. "I believe you, Marcus, but I also believe you are keeping something from us. Something important." He froze. A single breath, caught in his lungs, not guilt, but dread, deep dread. Miss Marple drew back slightly, her eyes calm, her mind clear. Marcus was hiding the truth, but not the truth everyone feared, not the truth of violence. Something else, entirely, something unexpected. She folded her hands, looked at him gently. He is hiding something, but not the truth they expect. Night settled gently over Hollingford Green, not dark, not threatening, just the kind of quiet evening small villages know well. Most lights were out, doors closed, curtains drawn, but Miss Marple put on her coat, wrapped her scarf neatly, and stepped outside. She did not rush. She never rushed. The night air was cool and steady. Fog lighter now, thin strands drifting along the hedges, enough to blur edges, not enough to hide them. She walked toward Hollow Path with small, careful steps. No lantern. She preferred the natural dimness. It softened noise, helped her listen. The ground under her feet felt firmer here, less disturbed, less trampled. But she saw earlier footprints faint along the edges, fresh ones, overlapping. Someone else had walked this way after the search party left. Miss Marple followed quietly, her mind calm, her thoughts arranged in neat rows. Every clue settled, not solved, but waiting for the next piece to fall into place. A light breeze passed. It carried a soft scent, burnt wood, a trace from the quarry kiln. Someone had returned. There, or passed near it. She continued forward, closer to the bend where the path narrowed. The fog drifted between the trees like a thin curtain being drawn aside, and with it came sound, low, muffled, but unmistakable. Voices. Miss Marple stopped at once. Her foot paused mid-step, then lowered silently. She tilted her head slightly, listening. Two men, not shouting, but arguing, a tense whispering argument. Quick words, sharp breaths, panic scraping at the edges of every sentence. She moved behind a tree, a small one, just enough cover. The voices grew clearer. "I told you not to come here again," one man said. A familiar tone, tight, unsteady. "Marcus." The other voice was lower, calmer, but hiding something under the calm. "That boy shouldn't have seen anything," the man said. "He wasn't meant to be there." Miss Marple felt her breath, slow, not from fear, from focus. The second man continued. "You panicked. You always panic." Marcus answered with a shaky whisper. "I didn't touch him. I wouldn't. He ran. He slipped." The low voice snapped back. "And you left footprints everywhere." A brief pause, just long enough for intention to form. Miss Marple took one small step closer, then another. Her shoes barely disturbed the leaves, her presence quiet, invisible in its own way. The men stood ahead at the curve in the path, fog drifting in thin ribbons around their outlines. She could not see their faces clearly, only their shapes. Two men, one tense, one still, both afraid. Marcus muttered again. He wasn't bleeding much, just a scratch. He ran toward the ridge. The other man spoke through clenched teeth. "And you should have told me sooner." Miss Marple steadied herself behind another tree. She needed to hear more, much more. The second man lowered his voice even further. "If he talks, everything falls apart." Marcus inhaled sharply. "I didn't mean for any of this." Miss Marple leaned forward just a little, enough to catch every word, enough to remain unnoticed. A twig cracked under her shoe, very softly, almost nothing. But the men didn't hear. Their argument drowned it out. The fog drifted again. The path darkened slightly. Branches shook with a faint breeze. Miss Marple tightened her scarf. Her eyes narrowed. Her mind clicked into place. She had found the missing link. Not the full truth. Not yet. But the path to it, clear as lantern light. She waited for the men's next words. Still, silent, unseen. She moves closer, unseen. Miss Marple stepped a little farther along the path. The fog shifted, enough for the shapes ahead to sharpen. Two men stood facing each other, close, too close. their voices low but strained. Marcus Alderton, shoulders tense, hands moving in quick, nervous gestures. And beside him, Mr. Halberd, still, tight-lipped, eyes sharp behind the tension in his jaw. Miss Marple remained behind a tree, quiet, present, hidden, her breath slow, her thoughts clear. Marcus spoke first. His voice cracked. "You should have told me what he found." "I didn't know. I didn't understand." Halberd's reply was colder, measured. "You didn't need to know. The boy should never have touched that map. He shouldn't have been near the cellar plans." Marcus ran a hand through his hair. "I didn't stop him from finding anything. He showed me the drawing. That's all. I told him to leave it alone. I told him it wasn't his business." Halberd stepped closer. "You grabbed him." "It was only to warn him," Marcus said quickly. "I didn't hurt him. I swear it." Miss Marple watched Marcus's shoulders shake faintly. Not guilt. Fear. The fear of someone who tried to help and made things worse. Halberd's eyes narrowed. "You told him to keep quiet, but he ran, straight to the ridge." Marcus nodded miserably. "Yes, he was frightened. He thought someone was following him." Halberd exhaled slowly. "That someone was you." "No," Marcus whispered. "I was trying to braided, stop him from shouting. He was waving the map. Anyone could have seen it." "What did he say?" Halberd pressed. "Tell me exactly." Marcus swallowed. "He said the cellar under the old cottage wasn't collapsed after all. He said there was something hidden there. Something I didn't want anyone to see." Halberd's jaw tightened. His voice dropped. "The boy saw too much." Marcus stepped back. "Then why didn't you talk to him? Why scare him? Why hide the map?" Halberd didn't answer right away. He stared toward the quarry instead. His breathing, steady, too steady. Miss Marple saw it clearly. Marcus trembled. Halberd did not. Two different kinds of tension. One anxious. One controlled. Marcus continued, voice breaking. "I only tried to pull the kite from the tree. That's all. He fell because he tripped. Not because I touched him." Halberd shot back. "And you left him alone?" Marcus looked down. "I went to find help, but you wiped the prints. You swept the dirt. You hid his map." Halberd's eyes flashed. "You were stumbling around, leaving tracks everywhere. Someone had to keep order. Someone had to think." Miss Marple's heart didn't race. It never did. She simply gathered the facts as they fell into place. Marcus had panicked, confused, clumsy, fearful of blame. Halberd had acted with intention, with planning, with quiet, cold purpose. Marcus whispered, "I didn't tell them everything, but I should have." Halberd stepped closer. His tone turned sharp. "No, you will not say a word. If the truth comes out, it destroys everything we built." Marcus flinched. "I don't care anymore." Halberd leaned in. "You will care. You must." Miss Marple understood the entire shape of the puzzle now. Not every detail, not every motive, but enough. Enough to know the difference between fear and strategy. She shifted slightly behind the tree, still unseen, still quiet, still listening. One man reacting, one man calculating. She watched them breathe. She watched them tremble. She watched them stand in the fog, bound together by a truth neither wanted to say aloud. And as the argument sharpened, one truth settled gently in her mind, clear and complete. One man panicked, the other planned. Miss Marple stayed hidden. A moment longer, the men's words lingered in the mist, heavy, revealing, and now everything began to arrange itself neatly in her mind. The scattered clues, the worried looks, the half-truths, all of it settled into place like pieces of a tidy sewing box. Evan's disappearance was not random, not foolish, not a child wandering into fog. It began with the cellar plan. Miss Marple stepped away from the tree and walked slowly toward the hollow entrance. Her thoughts moved in short, precise steps of their own. Evan had found the map first. Miss Marple imagined the boy in Halberd's classroom, flipping through old documents, finding a blueprint tucked where it didn't belong. The cellar under the old cottage ruins, marked clearly. Not collapsed, not abandoned, and not empty. The landlines drawn in sharper ink, different ownership marks, different dates, something altered, Something hidden, a quiet, simple fraud, built slowly, carefully. Over years, land ownership meant power in Hollingford Green, and Mr. Hulbert, quiet, educated, respected, had used that power well. But secretly, illegally, Evan had seen it. Evan had understood enough to ask questions, to follow the ridge, to check the cottage, to ask Marcus for help. Miss Marple walked slowly, her feet finding the familiar path. She replayed the discoveries. The torn strap on the satchel, the hidden footprints, the warm kiln, the quiet tension in Halbert's hands, and Marcus's frightened honesty. Evan must have confronted Halbert alone, even briefly. A quick argument, a frightened boy backing away, a desperate man reaching for control, not to kill, but to silence, to confuse the boy, to get the map back. Marcus had arrived moments later, frightened, trying to calm Evan, trying to explain he shouldn't show anyone the map yet, trying to protect him from something he didn't fully understand. But Halbert arrived again, and Halbert took control. He always did. He hid the map. He swept away footprints. He moved things in the quarry. He made sure suspicion spread to superstition and fog. And Marcus followed orders, scared, confused, feeling guilty only for his own silence. Miss Marple knew all this now. Logical, simple, step by step. Evan had discovered the truth. A truth too big for a boy. A truth Halbert could not allow out. Not the cellar, not the landlines, not the altered signatures. Fraud built quietly for years could crumble in one day of questions. One boy's curiosity, one map. Miss Marple paused at the ridge. She looked back once. Fog drifting lightly, branches still, night quiet. She folded her hands neatly. Her scarf fluttered with a faint breeze. The calmness in her face deepened. There were no ghosts, no curses, no strange lights. Just human hands, human fear, human greed. And now, a truth ready to be spoken. Miss Marple took a slow breath, clear, steady, unshakable. She had everything she needed, every thread, every detail, every quiet clue woven together. She walked back to the village, not hurried, not troubled, prepared. Tomorrow, all the lies would end, every one of them. Her voice, when she finally spoke to Ribbons, would be simple, logical, final. Miss Marple prepares to end the lies. The village hall filled before sunrise. Not noisy, not chaotic, just a tight circle of anxious faces. Clara Alderton, Marcus, Mr. Whitley, Constable Ribbons, several villagers who barely slept. Mr. Halbert stood near the back, still, silent, hands clasped behind him, eyes unreadable. Miss Marple entered quietly. Her presence softened the room. No drama, no tension forced, just calm, measured calm. Ribbons cleared his throat. Miss Marple has something to say. She stepped forward, hands folded neatly, voice even, gentle, clear. Evan followed a clue, she began. Not a legend, not a ghost tale. A simple clue he found in the schoolhouse. The room shifted. Marcus looked at the floor. Halbert did not move. Miss Marple continued. He found a cellar plan. Old, accurate, showing the cottage. Cellar was never collapsed, just hidden. Clara's breath caught. That old place? Surely. Miss Marple raised a hand softly. Yes, the very one. But the cellar held something more valuable. Old land records, unaltered signatures, unedited lines, documents someone wanted. Gone. Eyes turned slowly toward Mr. Halbert. Miss Marple did not look at him yet. She kept her voice steady. The village legend was useful. Fog and stories of strange lights, all convenient distractions, all repeated for years. Whispers rippled, a faint shake in the air. Miss, Marple went on. Last night, Evan confronted someone with the plan. He didn't understand its meaning, but he understood enough. He knew the records contradicted the ownership lines on newer deeds. Ribbons muttered, a fraud. Miss Marple nodded. A quiet one, a long one, built, slowly, by someone who handled village documents. Someone trusted. Her eyes turned to Halbert now. Not harshly, just directly. The schoolmaster swallowed once. No words came. Miss Marple continued. Marcus found Evan shortly after. They argued. Marcus tried to calm him. He panicked. He left footprints. He left the kite behind. But he did not harm the boy. Marcus let out a breath he'd been holding for hours. Clara reached for his arm. Miss Marple turned slightly. Mr. Halberd arrived next. He hid the map. He swept away tracks. He warmed the kiln. He suggested the Hollow's dark history, not to frighten Evan, but to frighten the search. A gasp rose from someone near the door. Ribbons stepped forward. And Evan? Where is he now? Miss Marple faced him gently. Alive. Weak. Cold. But alive. Near the cellar entrance. He crawled there. When he was frightened. Clara cried softly. Marcus covered his face. Relief shook through him. Miss Marple added, he remembered one thing clearly. A voice shouting his name. Not Marcus. Not any villager. Her eyes settled again on Halberd. Calm. Certain. And he remembered who. Took the map from his hand. The room went silent. Breathless. Still. Halberd's chair scraped the floor as he stepped back, hands trembling at last. The calm broke. Not loudly. Just visibly. Like a thread pulled too tight. Miss Marple folded her hands neatly. And now, Mr. Halberd must answer for every lie. Constable Ribbons moved toward him. Villagers murmured. Marcus looked up, shocked, confused, relieved. Halberd's voice cracked for the first time. You don't understand. I only wanted... But the sentence fell apart. His composure fell with it. Broken, at last, cornered by truth, contained by logic, surrounded by eyes that once trusted him. The village watched him collapse into the seat behind him, face pale, breath uneven. Miss Marple stepped back gently, her voice soft. Certain, and Halberd breaks at last. The village settled at last. Fog lifted from the hedges and roofs. Warm light returned to the windows. Evan rested safely beside his family, weak but smiling. Marcus stood nearby, shoulders lighter. Fear finally gone. Voices softened across Hollingford Green. People breathed again. Miss Marple wrapped her scarf and gave her quiet wisdom. Fear hides truth, she said softly, but truth waits patiently. But even in the calm, something lingered. A small detail, a small question. A small notice left on a desk in the schoolhouse, and Miss Marple knew. Yet one small letter remains, unanswered. Davis returns with a warm smile. He thanks you gently for sharing tonight's journey with Miss Marple. Then he leans in, voice soft. What warm drink kept you company tonight? And which clue did you notice first? He invites you to share your thoughts below, and to subscribe so you never miss a quiet twist in the village lanes. He gives a small chuckle, easing the room once more, and teases tomorrow's mystery, waiting just beyond the dusk. Then his voice settles into the familiar line. Tomorrow, another kettle will boil. A soft pause follows. A quiet promise.